the final lifetime power rankings. We've already done the NFL, we've already done baseball, and we just wrapped up hockey. And it's perfect timing because we are just getting ready to start the NBA season. So, why don't we start off with some NBA lifetime power rankings and see which teams we should look to move up or move down in the rankings after this upcoming season? So, for those of you who are new to the channel, thank you for stopping by. Let me explain real quick what the NBA Lifetime Power Rankings are going to be. I was born in 1990, and I've always had this project going on ever since I was a little kid about which teams have been the most dominant throughout my entire lifetime. And I update these standings every single year. And then have just been keeping track of it. So, what I do, the way my rankings work is I reward points for basically regular season performance, just 1 point for per win, and then I also award additional points on what I consider banner raising. So that would be playoff appearances, division titles, uh, conference championships, and total championships. So just again to reiterate the points, they're very similar to hockey since they play 82 games, just like hockey does. Each win is going to give each franchise 1 point. Playoff appearance is going to be 10.25 points. A division title is going to be 20 and a half. An appearance in the NBA Finals is going to be 41 points, and then the NBA Championship is going to be 82 points. I'm still one flaw that I feel like I have with these rankings is in NBA, division titles like mean nothing. Division standings or whatever, everything is solely based off of rankings within the conference itself. But teams put banners up in their rafters for winning the division. So we're going to add these into our points, and that might factor in or cause some teams to be a little bit higher or lower, but we're keeping it for now. Lastly, real quick, just to go over my expansion rule, for those of you who don't know, because these points are cumulative in nature, that means that teams that have joined after I was born are at a slight disadvantage. So to mitigate that, what I do is that I take their average points per season, and then I times that by the number of NBA seasons that have happened during my lifetime. So we'll make sure to point that out too. I'm going to try and keep this video a little bit shorter for you all, but still keep it in that podcast format. So let's go ahead and just get started right into the rankings. Starting our list off, we have the Minnesota Timberwolves at number 30. The Timberwolves really only have one that you would guess called golden era of Timberwolf basketball, and that is an 8-year stretch from 1997 to 2004 when they had Kevin Garnett, who was one of the best players during the league at that time. In that stretch, that's when they had 8 straight playoff appearances, and other than that, within the past 5 years, they've only had 3 more in the entire history of the Timberwolves franchise. Their first year was actually during the 1989-90 season. So I caught the tail end of their inaugural season. The best year that they had was in 2004 when they were a number 1 seed, made it all the way to the Western Conference Finals before they were beat by the Lakers. And really nothing else more to show for it. Next up, we have the Washington Wizards at number 29. The Washington Wizards were formerly known as the Washington Bullets and had that name all the way up until the start of the 97-98 season. The Washington Bullets only have 10 playoff appearances, and not really any golden age that I would tell you about. There was a stretch during the Gilbert Arenas era where they had 4 straight playoff appearances from 2005 to 2008. And then they had another decent stretch from 2014 to 2018 where they made the playoffs 4 out of those 5 years. However, they were never higher than a 4 seed and never made it out of the second round. Their only division title did come in that 2016-17 year. Swarming in at number 28, we have the Charlotte Hornets. The Charlotte Hornets have a pretty interesting franchise history when you think about it. During the 1989-90 season, again, which was the season that I caught the tail end of it, that was their second full season in the NBA, still one of the younger teams. Their best stretch of basketball happened, I would say, between the 1993 to 2002 seasons, where they had 7 playoff appearances, but they never made it past the second round. Even though they were a consistent playoff team, they did relocate to New Orleans for the 2002 to 2003 season, and then Oklahoma City following Hurricane Katrina. Because they left, a new expansion team was then awarded to Charlotte, and they were known as the Charlotte Bobcats. The Charlotte Bobcats had little success. They did have 2 playoff appearances, but they were swept both times. At the start of the 2013-14 season, the New Orleans franchise decided to change the name from the New Orleans Hornets to New Orleans Pelicans. And so Michael Jordan then brought Charlotte back the Hornets name the following year. And with all of that, they were able to keep the previous Charlotte Hornets franchise history dating back all that time. Their last playoff appearance was in 2015, 2016 season. They've kind of been hovering around the ninth and 10th seed in the East since then. They are actually the only team in my lifetime to have not won a division title yet. They did fall back 2 spots after being surpassed by the next 2 up-and-coming teams. At number 27, we have the Memphis Grizzlies. The Memphis Grizzlies are the first expansion team on this list, and they joined the league as the Vancouver Grizzlies during the 1995-1996 season. However, the city of Vancouver never saw a successful team while they were there. The highest win total that they had during that time was only 23 games. Once they did relocate to Memphis, though, they did see a little bit more success. I would say there's 3 eras worth mentioning. The first one would be the Pau Gasol era, where they had 3 straight playoffs from 2004 to 2006. However, they were swept in all 3 of those series during the first round. Then you have Pau's younger brother, Marc Gasol, joining the team, and with accompanied by Zach Randolph from 2011 to 2017, they had 7 straight playoff appearances. They even upset the number 1 seed Spurs as the 8 seed in 2011 and took the Thunder to 7 games in the second round. They did make it to the conference finals as a 5th seed in 2013 and were just known as a bunch of roughnecks that were just grinded their way in the playoffs. And then now you have the current era, which you would call the Ja Morant era. They've been coming off their best 2 seasons in franchise history. They were the number 2 seed this year, but were ousted by the Lakers. The biggest question mark is whether or not Ja Morant can stay out of trouble and actually help this team, this young team, climb over the hurdle. Coming in at number 26, we have the Sacramento Kings. The Sacramento Kings are coming off of one of their best seasons that they've had in over 20 years. The last time they had won their division before this previous year was in 2003. And it's pretty impressive that they did it this year, considering all 5 Pacific teams made the playoffs this year. But other than that, the Kings really only have one other era of really good basketball during my lifetime, and that was from 1999 to 2006 when you had White Chocolate, Mike Bibby, Chris Webber, Vlade Divac, Peja Stojakovic. They were a pretty dominant force in the league during that time. The closest they got to the title was in 2002 when they lost a controversial Game 7 to the Lakers in the Western Conference Finals. And I actually credit them to as the ones who put John Stockton and Karl Malone into retirement. At number 25, we had the Los Angeles Clippers. The Clippers were basement dwellers for most of the 90s and 2000s. Before 2012, the average points that they had in my rankings per year was 31. And then after 2012, it's nearly doubled to 61 points per year. And the biggest thing that happened was they sold the team, and Ballmer came in and revamped the team, revamped the roster. And first you had Lob City with Chris Paul and Blake Griffin. And then that eventually transitions to what we currently have with Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, and Russell Westbrook. Considering they've been pretty successful over the past 11 years, they still have only been to the Western Conference Finals once, and that was during 2021. Flying in at number 24, we have the New Orleans Pelicans. We've already talked a little bit about their history when we were talking about the Charlotte Hornets, but just to recap, they relocated from Charlotte in 2002 and became known as the New Orleans Hornets. They fielded competitive teams during the first two seasons, but the injury plagued 2004 2005 season led to their franchise worst 18-win season. But that season allowed them to snag Chris Paul with the number one pick. During the 05-06 and 06-07 seasons, the team was known as the New Orleans Oklahoma City Hornets after Hurricane Katrina. The team was finally able to return home for good during the 2007-2008 season, and this season ended up being their most successful season, where they won their only division title and posted a number 2 seed in the playoffs. However, they would lose in a 7-game heartbreaker to the Spurs in the first round. In the 2013, they changed their name from the Hornets to the Pelicans, and since Paul's departure, they've only had 3 playoff appearances. Moving into 23, I say we would move into our next tier of teams. The teams 24 through 30, I would consider our bottom dwellers of my lifetime. And now we're moving into it where we still have some unsuccessful teams, but at least they had 1 or 2 good seasons to where they really almost contended for a title. And starting off this list, we have the Philadelphia Sixers at number 23. The 76ers are the worst team on my list to actually play in a finals. After the end of the Charles Barkley era, it ushered in the Allen Iverson era, and that's where their lone appearance was during the 2000-2001 season. The Sixers were easily known as bottom dwellers for a really long time, and what everyone now refers to as the process, where they perfected the art of tanking, and this allowed them to get really high draft picks, and some of those picks worked out, some of them didn't. The most notably one is Joel Embiid, and he is currently leading the current era of the 76ers. However, they have not made it past the second round since that finals appearance back in 2001, and it looks like this team is in a little bit of drama and disarray, so we'll see how long they can keep it together or if Joel Embiid decides to go somewhere else. At number 22, we have the Brooklyn Nets. The Nets were known as the New Jersey Nets all the way until 2012. Their biggest success during my lifetime came at the end of the millennium when they had acquired Jason Kidd. And Jason Kidd, with him, they were able to go to 2 straight finals in 2002 and 2003. During that span, they actually had 4 division titles in 5 years. From 2008 to 2012, they did not see the playoffs. But then they slowly started to return as they started to acquire some other bigger name players. The most recent one being when they tried to form their own big three of Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and James Harden. And that era, especially with Kevin Durant being there the longest, just never really panned out. And eventually Kevin Durant left, Irving left, and Harden's now on another team as well. They still surprisingly have been making the playoffs and still somewhat relevant. So we'll see if they'll be able to continue to build or if they will start to flounder. Soaring in at number 21, we have the Atlanta Hawks. The Hawks surprisingly have 21 playoff appearances, which is higher than a lot of other teams that are above them on this list. However, only 7 of those appearances are where they were seated in the top half of the standings. They only have 3 division titles to show for it. The most probably well-known era was the Dominique Wilkins era of the 90s, but their best season was actually during the 2014-15 season when they had 60 wins and were the number 1 seed in the Eastern Conference, but were swept by LeBron's Cavs. They made a surprising Eastern Conference Finals run during the 2020 and 2021 season, led by Trae Young, and they didn't really continue off of that success. They have made the playoffs the last couple years, but it's been through the play-in games. The Hawks are the highest ranked team to have never made it to the finals. Coming in at number 20, we have the New York Knicks. The best era of Knicks basketball during my lifetime was right at the beginning during all of the 90s when they had the legend Patrick Ewing. The closest they did ever get to an NBA championship was about as close as you can get when they lost in Game 7 in the 1994 NBA Finals against the Rockets. Before this year's Heat run, they were the only number 8 seed to ever make it to the NBA Finals when they made it in 1999. But after that, they were pretty irrelevant for about 20 years, other than a 3-year stretch where they had Carmelo Anthony from 2010 to 2013. They made a surprising playoff run and made it as a 4 seed in 2021, but then fell back to 11th in the Eastern Conference. This past year, though, they did make it back to the playoffs as a 5 seed and won their first round series over the Cavs, and it looks like they are on their way up. At number 19, we have the Orlando Magic. At the start of the 90s, the Magic were able to luckily win 2 draft lotteries in a row to get Shaquille O'Neal and Penny Hardaway. With those 2 young stars, they had reached the NBA Finals but were swept by the Rockets in 1995. And unfortunately, Shaq left and they didn't really do anything after that. From 2000 to 2004, you had Tracy McGrady, who led them to 3 straight playoff appearances but never made it out of the first round. And then you ushered in the Dwight Howard era, where that was probably, other than the Shaq Penny Hardaway era, that was the most dominant part of Orlando Magic history. They had 6 straight playoff appearances from 2007 to 2012, and they even made it to the finals in 2009 before losing to the Lakers in 5 games. Before we get started on our number 18 team, we are moving into our next tier of teams who I would say have at least won a title or have been pretty consistent playoff teams from the time that I've been born. And starting off with the next 3 teams, we actually have 3 teams who have won the last 4 NBA championships. And the first one that we have on this list is the Milwaukee Bucks. The Milwaukee Bucks are the worst team on my list to have won a title, and I would say that their best time of playing basketball during my lifetime is actually happening right now. They did come within 1 game of winning or at least making it to the NBA Finals in 2000, 2001 with the core of Ray Allen, Sam Cassell, and Glenn Robinson. But other than that, they haven't really done much before Giannis Antetokounmpo got here, and they have been knocking on the door of a championship since the start of the 2018-19 season. They did just win their first title a few years ago, honestly, they probably maybe could have had more if Middleton didn't get hurt in 2022 or if Giannis was healthier this most recent year. Obviously, that's why you still play the games, but they have been a dominant team. At number 17, we have our reigning NBA champions, the Denver Nuggets. Before the turn of the century, the Denver Nuggets were bottom dwellers in the league. They didn't have anything really to show for their success until Carmelo Anthony got there. From 2003 to 2013, they had 10 straight playoff appearances and 3 division titles, but only made it to the Western Conference Finals once in 2009. Then usher in Jokic, and they've made it 4 straight playoff appearances and 2 division titles. They even had a Western Conference Finals appearance when they were in the bubble, lost to the Lakers. They avenged that Lakers series loss this year and swept them out of the playoffs, and then took it all the way to the title by definitely being the best team during the playoffs. Coming in at number 16, we have the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are the highest ranked expansion team in my list, and they started play during the 1995 1996 season. And they tried to gain some success under Vince Carter and Chris Bosh, but never really got there. Their best success during my lifetime came during 2013 to 2020 when they had DeMar DeRozan and Kyle Lowry. They were the ones who made the Raptors relevant again after Bosch left. They knocked on the door of the finals a few times together, but never could get over the hump. And then DeMar DeRozan was eventually traded to the Spurs for Kawhi Leonard, even though they didn't know if he was going to stay for very long or just the 1 year. But the 1 year was all they needed with him, and they were able to capture that lone title during the 2018-19 season. Next up at number 15, we have the Dallas Mavericks. I was born in April, so right at the tail end of the 89-90 season, and so I did catch the playoffs. And other than the lone playoff appearance that the Mavericks had during that 89-90 season, all 18 other playoff appearances have come during the last 23 years. During the 90s, they were, like the Nuggets, another bottom dwelling team. But once Dirk Nowitzki came and the German sensation, they were able to rise up. They did experience a couple of disappointments before getting to the top, where in 2006 they lost in the finals to Dwayne Wade and the Heat. And they were then upset by the Warriors as a number 1 seed the following year during Dirk Nowitzki's MVP run. But then they were finally able to upset the Heat this time against LeBron's Heat and capture their 1 title. Now with Luka Doncic, are they on the rise again? We're not really sure. 2022 was the first time they've advanced past the first round since their championship run. But they sort of had a disappointing end to this season after the acquisition of Kyrie. Coming in at number 14, we have the Indiana Pacers. The Pacers surprisingly have 25 playoff appearances, which is tied for the second most out of all of the franchises during my lifetime. But unfortunately, they have not been able to capitalize on that. They've had 2 main franchise deep playoff runs. The first one being during the Reggie Miller era, where they did lose heartbreakingly to Jordan's Bulls in the 97-98 Eastern Conference Finals. They then lost to the Knicks the next Eastern Conference Finals. They finally were able to make it to the NBA Finals, but lost to the Lakers in 6 games. Haven't really seen many deep playoff runs from them except until we got to the Paul George era, where they were eliminated 3 straight years by LeBron's Heat. At number 13, we have the Detroit Pistons. The Detroit Pistons had the first title of my lifetime when they were at the tail end of the Bad Boys era. After being swept by the Bulls in the Eastern Conference Finals in 1991, they still had some playoff appearances, but never made it past the first round. The golden era that I would say of Pistons basketball, during my lifetime at least, was between 2002 to 2008, where they made 6 straight Eastern Conference Finals, including their surprising dismantling of the Lakers for their second title during my lifetime. They did make it to the finals the next year looking for a repeat, but lost to the Spurs in 7 games. They've only made it to the playoffs twice since the 2008-2009 season and are currently in their worst 4-year stretch of my lifetime. at number 12, we have the Portland Trailblazers. The Trailblazers had two finals appearances during the first 3 years of my lifetime, but were unfortunately unable to take home the title in either of those years. Scottie Pippen had them one game away from reaching the finals again in the year 2000. But the two other eras that we would mostly talk about for this team are first with Brandon Roy and LaMarcus Aldridge trying to reverse the ship, but they had three straight first round exits from 2008 to 2011. Unfortunately, Roy couldn't stay healthy, and so he had to retire. And the next era was here just recently with Damian Lillard and CJ McCollum. They were able to bring them back to relevancy with 8 straight playoff appearances, including a surprising Western Conference Finals run in 2018 to 2019. However, it looks like now that they have traded away Lillard and also McCollum, this team is looking to rebuild and hopefully get the most out of their new and upcoming young stars. And the final team just outside of the top 10 is the Phoenix Suns, coming in at number 11. Between the time I was born until 2010, the Phoenix Suns had only missed the playoffs 3 times. Charles Barkley led them to a finals berth in 1993, but were one of the many teams that lost to Jordan's Bulls. Then ushered in Steve Nash, who took them to 4 deep playoff runs, including 3 Western Conference Finals appearances. After Steve Nash, though, they had a decade of playoff absences from 2010 to 2020. But the acquisition of Chris Paul has returned this team as one of the more dominating teams in the NBA. They even were able to make it to the finals in the 2021 season before losing to the Bucks. They had their best record the following year, but were surprisingly upset by the Mavericks in 7 games during the second round. The team tried to make another deep finals run this past year by acquiring Durant. With Durant, Booker, and Paul, they just couldn't stay healthy long enough to overcome that in the playoffs. And now Paul is shipped off to the Warriors, but they are now bringing in Bradley Beal. So it will be interesting to see if this team will be better or worse. Starting off our top 10, and I would say the last team on my next tier of NBA teams, we have the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavs were pretty decent in the 90s. They had 7 playoff appearances and were one iconic Michael Jordan shot away from making it to the finals in 1992. But other than that, LeBron is everything else. They've with LeBron, we all know the story. He's grown up there and really brought this team to relevancy. He couldn't quite get them over the hump to a championship and left for the Heat. The Cavs obviously stumbled after that, but were immediately back to relevancy when LeBron came back and made it to 4 straight NBA Finals appearances. LeBron was only able to get them one title, but that was pretty good considering the buzzsaw that they had to go through in order to get that finals, beating the 73 win Warriors. And so that's what at least has them up in the top 10. And now with the acquisition of Donovan Mitchell, they still are going to now be a consistent playoff team. Starting my next list of teams, I would consider these 4 teams as the teams that just consistently underperform in the playoffs. And we're going to start this list off with the Oklahoma City Thunder at number 9. The Thunder, as a lot of you probably know, they were known as the Seattle Sonics up until 2008. The 90s were known as the Gary Payton, Sean Kemp era, but they were the first seed to ever lose to a number 8 seed in 1994. They did rebound from that heartbreaking exit and were able to make it to the finals in 1996, but ultimately lost to the Bulls. Then the Seattle Sonics, with everything circulating around Oklahoma City and New Orleans, and Oklahoma City showing that they have enough fan support, The Seattle Sonics inexplicably decided that they were going to relocate from Seattle to Oklahoma City and become the Oklahoma City Thunder. With their second year player, Kevin Durant, and then also drafting players like Russell Westbrook and James Harden, they were able to make deep playoff runs, including even going to the finals in 2012 before losing to LeBron's Heat. The Thunder looked to still make a bunch of deep playoff runs after that finals appearance, but blowing that 3-1 lead to the Warriors led to the departure of Durant and ultimately the downfall of this team. They look like they're sort of on the rise up again with a ton of also draft assets, so we'll see if they can get back to the playoffs this year. Next up on our list, we have the Houston Rockets coming in at number 8. The Houston Rockets, at least, even though I call them playoff disappointers, they at least have 2 NBA titles to show for it. During the 2-3 year periods of Michael Jordan's reign, they were able to make back-to-back titles with Hakeem Olajuwon. After those 2 NBA championships, they didn't really do a whole lot more after that until they had Yao Ming and Tracy McGrady. They had 5 playoff appearances with those two, but only made it past the first round once. We then ushered in the James Harden era after he was traded away from Oklahoma City, and they won their first division title since those championship runs. They were taken out by the Warriors 4 out of those 5 postseasons, including blowing a 3-2 lead in 2018 Western Conference Finals with Chris Paul getting hurt. They are now currently experiencing the worst 3-year period of my lifetime and are sliding back in these rankings because of it. Coming in at number 7, we have the Utah Jazz. The Utah Jazz are the team that I root for. I can't really fit on this screen my jersey, but for those of you who are hardcore fans could probably figure it out. The Utah Jazz are just unfortunately a team that has never been able to piece it all together to be able to get over the hump and get that championship. The Jazz though do have 25 playoff appearances, which was tied for second. They actually also have our second in most wins all time during my lifetime, which just makes it that much sadder that they haven't been able to capitalize because of that. The biggest success came during the John Stockton, Karl Malone era, and right during the middle of the 90s is where they were able to make their 2 finals runs, but were ultimately stopped by Jordan's Bulls. After the Stockton Malone area, they didn't really do a whole lot until Deron Williams was able to develop a little bit more. And with Deron Williams and Carlos Boozer, they were able to make some threats in the playoffs, but only made it to the Western Conference Finals once. And in fact, that one Western Conference Finals appearance has been the only conference finals appearance that the Jazz have had since their 1998 finals run. They tried again to make something work with Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, but with some disappointing first round or second round playoff exits, the team has decided with Danny Ainge now at the helm to blow the system up. They did surprisingly better than we all thought they would last year with Laurie Markkinen really taking off, and with other up and coming stars like Walker Kessler. Maybe this team will be able to build quicker than we initially thought, but they still got a bit to go before they can ever become championship caliber. And at number 6, we have the Boston Celtics. The Celtics spent most of the 90s rebuilding after Bird's retirement, but then with the arrival of Paul Pierce, it made the team competitive, but not really too threatening until the arrival of the other 2 players to create the first real big 3. With Kevin Garnett and Ray Allen, they had 5 straight seasons of championship level teams, including their title in 2008, and did make it back to the finals again, but had a rematch loss to the Lakers in 2010. Uh, after those After that core got too old to really continue on, they had a few seasons of rebuilding, But now they've been able to rebuild with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. They were able to make it to the finals and lost to the Warriors here just recently. They are considered one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. We'll see if they can get back to the finals. Otherwise, we're going to have to figure out what to do with these two really expensive players. We are now in our top five, and I would say also the top tier list of our teams who have just culminated in the majority of the NBA titles. I'm just looking over at my other screen here, seeing how many titles. The next five teams account for 24 of the NBA titles that we have here. And so I consider these the most dominating franchises of my lifetime. But starting with number five, this team is still actually quite a bit further from the top four. It's actually closer to the Boston Celtics than the other teams. But because of their dominance this past decade, I thought I'd put them in my top tier of list. And if you haven't guessed it already, we have the Golden State Warriors coming in at number five. The Warriors were horrendous from 1994 to 2012. They, other than that one playoff round upset as an 8 seed, like I mentioned before, against the Mavs in 2007. But with the rise of Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Klay Thompson, and then later on Kevin Durant, the last 8 years, 9 years makes up more than half of this team's franchise points or dynasty points, whatever I'm calling them, with six finals appearances, and honestly, without a miraculous effort from LeBron James and then also Kevin Durant blowing out his Achilles, this team probably could have had six finals in six championships. And that is just ridiculous of what the success that they've had over the past decade. They're still getting a little bit older, but Steph Curry is keeping this system running, and we'll see if they have another deep playoff run in them before they have to start considering maybe looking at rebuilding some more behind Steph. At number four, we have the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls, there's not really much more that needs to be said other than Michael Jordan. All six of those titles came during the very first part of my lifetime. And so this team has been always a top franchise of my lifetime ever since I was born. After Michael Jordan, there really hasn't been much to talk about. Derrick Rose did make them threaten a title run every now, but unfortunately, injuries plagued him and plagued the franchise, and they've never really been a serious threat. They've slowly been trickling down the rankings as some other teams have been catching up to them, but those six titles from Jordan's era are definitely what has this team high up the list. At number three, we have the Miami Heat. And this is part where maybe the amount of division titles of what teams have won might be the differing factor of why Miami is ranked so high up this list, because they definitely have out of even they have less titles than the Warriors, but they have the second most division titles, and I think that's just what has them vaulted up a little bit higher than this list, at least past the Bulls. But I don't want to shortchange them anymore. Let's talk a little bit about their history. Alonzo Mourning and Tim Hardaway had them knocking on the door of becoming a legitimate championship level team at the end of the 90s, but it wasn't really until Dwayne Wade got there and took them and carried them all the way to that championship in 2006. They did then. Wade lured LeBron and Chris Bosh, and they had that huge Big Three era where they made four straight finals appearances, including sandwiched in those two championships over the Thunder and the Spurs. They have always just kind of been lurking in there. Like I said, their division has been pretty weak, which has allowed them to consistently make the playoffs. But when they've made the playoffs, they've also made some surprising runs. They had a bubble finals appearance when they lost to the Lakers just a few years ago. And then as an 8 seed, they upset many title contenders, including the Celtics and the Bucks, and were able to make it to the finals again before finally running out of gas against the Nuggets. And at number 2, we have the Los Angeles Lakers. And the Lakers, the 2000s decade was the era in which they dominated. They didn't do a whole lot after Magic Johnson retired. It was not until Kobe and Shaq got there where they were able to take over that back-to-back-to-back titles. After Shaq left, though, the team kind of faltered and even threatened with trade rumors from Kobe. So they brought in Pau Gasol, which was just enough to help Kobe be able to take home back-to-back titles later on in that decade. And the Lakers then, after Kobe retired, or even at the towards the end of his career, the Lakers sort of faltered again with an aging roster. But they were able to capture their 6th title, which ties the Bulls for the most in my lifetime. And that was when they were able to bring LeBron over. They did it during the bubble. You can, whether or not you want to put an asterisk next to that, that's up to you. But we count them here, and so uh, the team has kind of risen, and we'll see if they're able to hold on to it. They're still consistently making playoffs now, so they'll be able to at least continue to earn franchise points and maybe catch up to the number 1 team. But we'll see if they'll able to do that once LeBron leaves. And if you haven't figured it out already, we have the San Antonio Spurs coming in as the best team during my lifetime. If you don't count this 4-year playoff drought that they're currently going through, the Spurs have only missed the playoffs one other time. And that one playoff absence allowed them to go in and get Tim Duncan, which immediately took them from a serious playoff contender to an actual championship contender. And with Tim Duncan and the collection of David Robinson, Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, they were just disgustingly good and consistent, taking home 5 NBA championships. The Spurs have almost 2 full seasons worth of wins than any other team. And with the 4-year playoff drought, it almost seems unfair that they were able to win the draft this year and nab Victor Wembanyama. I mean, it seems unfair because they've just been so dominant, and it's just, of course they get to have them. But at the same time, what other franchise would be best off to have them as one that has just consistently been, kind of a slow churn, do it the right way team? And this team is still pretty far out ahead of the Lakers. It would take a couple of great seasons by the Lakers to even come close to surpassing the Spurs. So there you have it. That's my rankings. Let me know what you think. I appreciate it. All the feedback, all the comments. Tell me what you don't like about the ratings. Tell me what you like about them. Tell me where you would rank people based off of your own opinions. I really appreciate the support. Thanks again. We're still going to be doing some sports talking, but I might be shifting gears a little bit. But please stay tuned, hopefully to bring you some good content that you'll all appreciate it. Until then, guys, have a good one.